That piece really got me thinking. I've recently done something really dramatic in my life. You know when like your parents tell you, oh, keep a stable job. Oh, do your 9 to 5. Make sure you pay the bills. And so I do my radio gig and I've got another 9 to 5 job that I do. And I just woke up one morning. I just got paid and I thought, you taking the mick? Are you taking the mick? Are you telling me that this is how much I'm worth? And I was like, don't want to do this anymore. So I quit. And I think, I mean, don't, okay? Don't. I kind of have some skills I can fall back on. It's not the worst thing in the world. But just hearing what you're saying about go after your dreams, sometimes you just got to do it, and sometimes we choose the stable role. And I remember, I used to work in admin at Dumont University, and I remember speaking to one of my colleagues, and she'd been there for 30 plus years, and she was just like, oh, I had a baby, and I needed to pay the bills, and I just had my daughter, and I thought, hey, this cannot be me in 30 years' time. So I think it's really powerful to get those really real reminders about, taking life by the horns and sometimes being a bit brave and kind of going out there. I kind of want to lead the conversation in a slightly different direction. Do you think there's conversations as Black women that we should be having with each other and ourselves that we're not? I'm going to come to you first.
Okay.
Are there conversations that we should be having? And you guys think about it as well.
Okay, are there conversations that we're supposed to be having with ourselves?
And other Black women that we're currently not?
Well, it's hard to say in this room because we're doing it, aren't we? Yeah. And I think sometimes it's finding a way to speak about what's not there, but also, I'm 42 years old, right? I come from, both my parents were born in Jamaica. My mother came here very, very young. My dad came here just a bit later, yeah? They were in the army. I traveled the world as a child. I'm extremely audacious, okay? Some things that maybe I didn't get a piece of, I got a piece of something else, But I feel very much that I'm of the generation moving forward that is supposed to be solutionary, right? I believe that we stand on the shoulders of revolutionaries who did an incredible job, an amazing job. So I'm very for the solution, I'm for talking about the problems, I'm for seeking the problems, I'm for digging deep, I'm for pulling out the pain, healing. I'm all for God. I'm all for understanding that is the guidance that we should be listening to. I think there's more so than just conversations with each other. I think we could all do with recognizing prayer. We've been through a trendy time of meditation. Those things aren't the same thing. Prayer speaks to our vulnerability. In prayer, you call for strength and coverage and guidance. So yes, I think there are conversations we don't have, but we're having it today. I think there are conversations, honest conversations to have with ourselves. I think breaking habits is very important. I think it can be a lot to pave new paths as well. You may be of the generation that isn't suffering. You may be of a generation that is recovering. You may be of a generation that is renewing, that can be lonely. You can sometimes, you may have a room full of people who are like, yeah, girl, and you just don't feel like that, How do you manage to be a part of everything and not maybe be burdened? Maybe you don't feel oppressed. Maybe you don't feel trodden. You don't have to be, that is not our identity card. You don't have to be in pain to be a Black woman. You know what I mean? You don't have to have a problem with your dad and issues with you don't have to have all of that. It's a very deep privilege Windrush, everyone was coming off of there with some fly garments, man. No one looked like they didn't know what they were doing. They were traded up hard. They were tailors, they were nurses, they were doctors, they were builders. We do not have just a history of not have. It's a lot of storytelling. So reclaiming your story, speaking your strength, speaking your truth, honesty, I think is very important. And being okay with being okay, because it's okay to not be okay. Absolutely, it is. We're to strengthen each other, to strengthen ourselves. That's a part of life. But being okay with being okay is a part of life too. And celebrating that, celebrating people's abilities, celebrating what they've got, where they're coming from, who they're coming from. I've got a set of grandparents that when I hear a voice like that, I'm here, because it's just the regalness, the passion, the audacity, connecting to that too, because sometimes it's fed back to you a different way. Nikki Giovanni says, she has to tell her own story, because if she doesn't, people are going to be like, she's poor. She grew up poor, and they're not going to talk about the food, they're not going to talk about the dance, they're not going to talk about the prayer, they're not going to talk about the energy. So I'm not very good with short answers, but yeah, I think there are conversations we're not having, there's conversations we are having, but I think that we're being guided in a great way.
I think it's a really pertinent thing you say, about being okay. About being okay. And I think it's really, you mentioned this as well about sometimes wearing the suffering as a badge of honor. I find that sometimes, you be in conversations in rooms and people are talking, and sometimes the Black identity is so heavily tied to suffering and pain and difficulty. And sometimes that can become like a big part of who we are. Cecil, I can see you nodding there. How do we? Because I know you've also done a lot of work with Windrush, and you've kind of seen the generation go through. What kind of, and maybe what kind of conversation should we be having more of?
Well, I concur with lots of things that you've said. I'm not quite sure, but some of the things I think we as women in here need to be considering is how certain identities are imposed on us and what is acceptable. Black female identity. So the issue of colorism is a conversation we should be having to those who present images about us through the media that is invoking a hierarchy of Black womanness and what it is to be a Black woman. And I think we should be a bit more proactive in challenging what image of us is presented to us. And I wonder anecdotally whether some of the difficulties that younger Black women, because I'm not a young Black woman, but I read and I'm aware of research, the extent to which their resilience is being eroded. And I just wonder whether that is partly tied to the sorts of representations that they get that I never got during my generation, where my generation was about, you go to Sunday school, it takes a village, so if you saw Mrs. Smith in town and you didn't say hello before you got home, who'd tell you that you turn woman? That you don't say hello to Mrs. Smith. So I think the complexity in terms of what our younger women have to cope with, perhaps we didn't have the same range of complexities. The other thing is, I don't know whether we're always supportive of each other.
This is where I was leading to.
Do you see? I really, I get my son. You can tell that I'm an academic, so I don't answer the question directly. My son, who is a teacher, head of maths at his school in Nottingham, for their Black History Month, he did a short video in which he spoke about important issues in his life. And he used me as a focal point. I was quite taken aback because I didn't expect to be hearing those things. Well, I don't expect to be hearing the sort of things that he was saying, because it's likely that those things are said about me when you're dead, so you don't hear your children. No. And one of the things he put up was that in 2013, I was one of 10 black female professors in the country. And his colleagues said to him, "Why doesn't your mother talk about this and feel proud?" And he says, "My mother would never feel proud. In fact, she feels quite ashamed, because there should be more. There should be more. There should be more talented black women being given the opportunity to make their substantive contribution to knowledge, academia, our narrative about who we are." Because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, one of the rites of passage in this country is education, and particularly academia, higher education. It is where your future leaders are created. It is where the knowledge about who is important, who isn't important, the values that society hold in high esteem, that's where it happens. And we should be in there doing it for ourselves. And if we're not in there, others are doing it for us. So going 2 points then, it's about how we as black women support each other. How do we? Because I don't think we do to the degree that we ought to. And there's also linked to that is the hierarchy of blackness.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's lead into that a little bit more. How then? So that's the case, as you're saying. How do we empower one another as black women? How do we do that? And not just amongst our peers, I think generationally as well. I think now in my journey, I'm spending a lot more time with my mom and listening to her and appreciating her as well. But prior to that, I think, it's just, I know what I'm doing and, but how do we do that? And how do we do that across generations as well? Debbion?
I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I have to write things down. So one of the things I wrote down was that I'm in the age group, from where I'm sat, it feels like, the sisters are definitely doing it for themselves. Mm-hmm. But I would like to remind the younger generation that nothing's actually new, and that I would encourage younger black women to really know their worth. And I've written here, beyond bumper stickers and book titles, I see an awful lot of love yourself, none of it feels real to me. In fact, there are times I actually have to say to my daughter, because I've got her on Instagram, and I might say, do you know what? That person that you think has got it sussed actually hasn't. You don't have to buy that book. So my biggest thing is, I think that people need to look after their mental health as black women, as well as their physical and visual appearance. Ask for help, direction, guidance, listen when it's given. But as for the question you asked, which is, what are we not talking about? I don't know about anybody else, but I have gotten to 58. My mother died 2 years ago. And suddenly there's a massive can of worms opened up. There's something about our families. There's something about our sisters, some that were born away, some that were born here. There are massive conversations that need to be had. I was born here, my young sister was born here, my two sisters were born in Jamaica. We never had this conversation. And now we are essentially orphans, and we're still not having the conversation. there is something in there about us as a generation of sisters, our families, where we're just not quite getting. I don't know if you can relate to what I'm saying to it. Good.
Yeah,
It's almost like, and then you feel alone all over again. If that makes sense. I know I'm talking a little bit, ugh, but that's what's going on for me. I think there are conversations that I'm having with my friends, but I'm not having with my own sisters and my own family.
Is that an intentional? And I guess I'm opening up to all of you. Is that an intent? Maybe for yourselves as well. Is that intentional that there's a lot that we don't share? Does this maybe come back to this idea of strength and not wanting to come across as weak? I know, sometimes for our parents' generation, oh my gosh, there's stuff that my mom tells me that she doesn't tell her peers because it's a thing of shame, and not wanting to, you don't want this family to say this thing and this thing. And there's all this hiding.
And the secrets. I mean, I'm working on a project right now about grief. And when you said something about, grief and then being able to let go. Yeah, I think actually, because there's a lot less secrets and lies now in families than there used to be, it's a different thing. I'm not quite sure, but things are changing. Yeah. But I think we have to acknowledge our differences as Black families and think about how we do it.
It's almost like we came from a time of children should be seen and not heard. So, there was that thing of don't bother asking. I don't know how old my grandma was so now. I never knew how old she was. I was never allowed to ask her age. But like you said, when I'm gonna ask different things, what came to me is like the secrets, generational curses, and mental health is such a big one. And I think within our community, we don't talk about it enough. And it goes back to that thing of strength. You've got to be strong and just get on with it, or you don't want to label yourself as depressed. You might just feel like even if you bring that up, what are you talking about? You're chatting rubbish. Stop your nose. You ain't depressed. Stop your nose. You're just having a bad day or something like that. And it's just about being open and being able to, if you notice the signs, which are very often now, you okay, sis? Like, it's okay. Like, how you doing? Even simple words like, how you doing? Just giving one another an open space to just have them vulnerable conversations.
Do you think there's been some information missing along the way when it comes to understanding mental health? I think from a cultural perspective, I find within the Black community that sometimes, again, probably going back generationally, as you say, oh, just go lie down or go and, sometimes the fact that you're going through stuff is just dismissed as, oh, just get on with it, or, we can do that. Is there something deep rooted that maybe there's been a lack of information that maybe us as Black people have missed that other cultures potentially have more of or not?
I first of all want to say everyone's messed up. Like this idea that, Europeans talk well.
Right.
There's a lot of identity crisis amongst Europeans. They think they're American, they're really Italian, they think they're, English, they're really from France, they don't know who they are. They have problems with incest, they have problems with molestation. The world is corrupt. We are experiencing it. And many of us have multiracial families. A couple of us, you've got a great granddad who's white. There's no point in missing that or skipping that out, or Asian or Chinese, or, a few decades ago, there were world wars happening. No one was talking. All parents were ripped away. You're dealing with past traumas. So I think a very important word here is empathy. Empathy is an intellectual capacity, and empathy is a standard of humanity. Because to deal with the I and the problems of the I and the pains of the I, and then to turn around to someone and say, help me, and you don't know what you're talking to. Have you ever had a time where you're having a really bad day, maybe bad month, maybe bad year, and then you talk to a colleague or something and you find out that you know, the parents were murdered when they were children and they were immigrants, they were ripped out of the country and sent to da-da-da-da-da and blah, 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 and this happened. And you're there like, yo. It kind of rocks you a little bit because sometimes your dad that didn't treat you properly, you got no idea what his 0 to 9 was, or your sister who's, you've never asked me how I feel, was molested when she was 4 by someone she sees every Christmas. You don't know that, you know, and empathy makes you start to find reason for things and to connect to be able to take history and geography and all the things you know about the world. And, oh, wow, my grandmother was born in 1923. That's just a little bit after the First World War. I wonder how that impacted the people that she was raised with. And so all this intellect, you know, being Western and growing up in schools where you've got all these books that they're terrible because they ain't telling you the truth, but they're telling you a little bit of something. Most of my intelligence did not come from school. All of my knowledge of self did not come from school. There's a bit from, you know, I'm an army brat. I was born in Germany. I started school in Hong Kong. My mum could have been, I mean, David Roddy gonna eat your heart out. Like she's a selector above and beyond. The amount of music that she played that helped me to know who I am. Music, songs, you know, bits of books that I got, and the amount of my education that has nothing to do with the institution of education. You know, I remember when I was in, you know, performing arts school, and God bless him, my teacher, bless his heart, he really thought he was doing something great. And he was like, you know, we're going to have black theatre for this term. And I was like, black theatre? What do you mean by black theatre? What do you mean when you're saying that? And he really thought I was going to be over the moon about it, you know? And his intentions were absolutely pure. But I was like, what do you mean when you say black theatre? All biblical plays? You know, do you mean something with a black lead? Do you mean things that you've whitewashed and you've taken away? What do you mean? You know, and so empathy for yourself, forgiving yourself for your innocence, for your vulnerability, being interested in understanding what is wrong if something's wrong. If someone can't give you what you need, what's wrong with them, why they can't? Not just why are they doing it to me? And that's everything. That's the mental health issue that is racism. That's the mental health issue that is misogyny. That's the mental health issue that is violence and vileness and wickedness, and recognizing how blessed you are to not be like that. Gaining something from that, operating from that space. You know, so I think intellectual empathy and these resiliences and these other things, so that you can coat yourself with something while you experience this corrupt world. And it hasn't been corrupt for 20 years, yo. It hasn't been corrupt since George Floyd. It hasn't been corrupt since the enslavement. It hasn't been corrupt since Babylon. It hasn't been, you can go back where they are. You know, we're existing in a corrupt world. So what do we expect from this corrupt world? What are we reaching for? And then being the difference that you want to see, you know, how important that is as a part as well. And I may have gone off a little bit, but I'm very for the empowerment of your soul, recognizing that the gift of life is a blessing. There are so many who are not here right now, didn't get to your age, didn't get through their first day. So how can we empower ourselves in all of this real stuff, in all of this healing, in all of this seeking to do better, and recognizing how far ahead you are, recognizing that you are what your grandmother was dreaming of in your depressed state. While you're pissed off and the bills are too much, like you're exactly what she was planning for. What, you went to uni and dropped out, you're a success. And you dealt with that, and you built, and you grew, and you did more, and you managed, you know? and you managed. So balancing it all up, I think, and the empathy is, I think, a very important part. I can't even remember what the question was. I really can't.
I think listening, I just remembered what that word was. I was thinking about imposter syndrome.
Absolutely.
And when you just listening to you, it's like it's about acceptance,
Yes.
accepting yourself.
Absolutely.